one of the most important skills we learn, I think, maybe the most important, is coming to understand, coming to know what I call our inner teacher, or you could call it our inner knowing, or you could talk in terms of connecting with just deeply with our own what's most essential or most essentially true about our own nature, our own being. It's coming to know ourselves deeply. And as we do that, I know, as many of you know from your own experience, we come to, through our experience, to know what we can trust in ourselves. And more and more, even the places that are maybe not so wise in us, or that can lead us in not such good directions, are actually more and more able to discern when that's actually what's happening. So that discernment is not that we're always resting in the place of wisdom or right action, but we actually, in moment by moment, can tell the difference. And so we learn just to rest in our own sense of knowing, if you will, in any situation, in any moment. And then we learn to trust that. That is not in any way an arrogance. It's not that no one can teach us anything, and certainly not that we can never make mistakes or, create suffering for ourselves and for others. No, it's not saying that. But more and more we know what we can trust, and we don't need external guidance so much anymore. That happens in our formal meditation practice for sure, but I hope it can happen more and more in all aspects of our lives. We have to be a little careful. So when we're newer from a Dharma perspective, when maybe we haven't done a lot of this inner exploration kind of work, maybe we haven't learned to trust ourselves. We don't trust ourselves, or we haven't had a lot of experience, and so we make our best choices, which is fine, because even if we're not sure what to do, if we make our best choice, as long as we keep a receptive attitude, to look to see what happens. It's really, I like to think of the learning tools of the world, of the earth, is action and then reaction. So a lot of the learning, of course, is how we hold what comes back to us when we do anything, we take an action. And then if it turns out what we did wasn't so wise, wasn't so skillful, wasn't helpful, and actually it was harmful, then there is such a thing as, in the Dharma world, they talk about remorse in a wholesome way, in a helpful way, to reflect on, well, that didn't feel so good. I don't feel that, I don't want to act like that. And we feel kind of the badness of how it feels, to learn, but that's different than tearing ourselves down and beating ourselves up, which is something that can happen, but then that's when we need some kindness for ourselves, because that's not always so helpful. So it's all comes down to being as receptive and open to what's actually happening as our teacher as we can be, and not filtering it. This is what we talk about over and over, but it's so essential about just making our best choices and then looking for the feedback. But even if we understand this process, even in the beginning, just the choice when probably in the beginning stages, it would serve us well. We do need to. We don't have the experience in whatever it is in life, and so we want to look to others maybe who've gone a little ahead of us in whatever direction, whatever aspect of life we're talking about. Here we're focusing more from a Dharma perspective, but it could be anything in life. And we listen to people whom we trust, and then we try it on for ourselves to see what's being offered. But even the choice to do that, we are making that choice ourselves. That's still listening to ourselves, our own inner guidance, even in the beginning, really, to choose to go in a certain direction. And we just make our best, this feels right. Maybe we don't know, but it says, well, it makes sense, it sounds good. But of course, we want to have some wisdom and discernment. So if we're going to open ourselves up, we haven't touched in with the inner knowing, the inner teacher so much, and we really are looking for external sources, which we all do and we all need to do. It's very, very important, though, to not lose our critical faculties. And, we need to look at any teacher, and does that teacher walk their talk, and do they seem to manifest what they're teaching? Are they what they teach? That's an important question. And you don't have to be perfect, but do they seem to be genuine and authentic? And you look to see how they manifest and aren't afraid to make shifts or to move in new directions if you need to. And then you try on the teachings, you try on the practices, and you look to see for yourself, how's it fitting for you? How's it feeling? And once again, we really are relying back on ourselves. And even again, if we haven't learned a lot, maybe we're newer, we don't really know, but we know how it feels and resonates for us. Because the one thing that we can trust even from the beginning stages is our good intentions. And even if we haven't articulated our intentions that clearly, maybe more of a vague sense, we still have a basic feeling of what draws us. Again, here we're talking about, particularly in our Dharma lives, we at least have a sense of, what's drawing us. And I'm guessing for all of us, even if you haven't put these exact words to it yourself, it's some version of wanting to cultivate a good heart, however that is for you, more loving kindness or compassion, empathy, care, less reactivity, more wakeful presence. These are all these words we use. More, I said less reactivity, maybe more of a wise response in life, less of a reaction to life. In the way I say it, some of you have heard me say this over and over, but for me it captures the essence is, how do we come to live in a way that creates less and less suffering for ourselves, but for others, and to creates more happiness and well-being. Happiness is a great word. I prefer well-being because sometimes we don't walk around and we're all in this glow of happiness, but we can have even in those times, a deep place of equanimity and peace and fulfillment, if you will. So I happen to like the word equanimity. You'll, of course, find your own words. So I think all of us, we wouldn't be meditators if we didn't want to move in these good, beautiful, wholesome directions. So we can always, even if we're brand new, it's really simple. Does it pass the gut check? Does that practice? How does it feel? It can be a little tricky because there are places, and we want to be respectful of places where if something doesn't feel right, well, maybe we are bumping up against an edge that maybe could be useful for us to hang out with here. Maybe this teacher or teaching is coming at us in a way that there's something here for me to look at. So yes, there can be value in that. However, if we go too far in that direction, what happens? Then we end up being in the worst cases, situations can be kind of abusive sometimes, or it can go to places that don't feel so good, but we don't want to go against that teacher teaching or that community, whatever. So then we need to move back in following our own sense. Of course, if we go too far in the other direction, then we don't listen to anyone, and we're just being led around by our likes and dislikes, or we're led around by our delusion, perhaps. And then maybe we do need to really stop and come back and bump up against some learning edges there. So it's always a balance, and the best we can ever do is bring the best sincere assessment that we can. But it really seems to be that if we do stay open in these ways, again, we just bring the best awareness that we can. But keeping that attitude in mind, it does seem to be pretty much a self-correcting process that, yeah, hope we don't go off in any one direction or other too far astray. But if we're really willing to listen to ourselves, at some point we'll know this isn't right and we'll move back in the right direction. So I really think that ultimately it's important to, I hope we all, to trust ourselves, but at the very least listen to ourselves. And that, for some of you, it may not be any issue. Everything I'm saying may sound like, well, yes, of course, that's obvious. But there are plenty of people out there who, we all have, I've used this phrase, we all have what I call our top 10 tunes. And in particular, I'm talking about our top places where, I don't want to call them our wounded patterns because that's all, but definitely our issues that we all work with and that color our perceptions, whether it's self-critical mind, self-esteem, doubt, worry, anxiety, it just goes on and on for all of us. We all have ours and our unique combinations. And so those are going to come with us, of course, to meet any experience. But some people really, one of their top 10 tunes can be, it's really, really a lot of self-doubt. This is different than the self-critical mind. This is the mind that just doesn't know how to trust themselves, maybe for whatever reason. They grew up that way as a child or whatever, but it can be hard to just to know what's right or wrong, or to trust, or for it to be okay to have your opinions, your feelings, your views, without having to justify it, but just because that's how you feel. It doesn't have to be any more reason than that. And so that can be a real learning edge then for some people who have to learn to do that. And part of the learning may be, okay, make some choice, any choice, and then let's stay open to see what happens, again, with a sense of kindness. So I offer all of this really, I guess that could be the theme of the talk itself, but I'm actually prefacing what I really want to, what the main piece I wanted to offer, because I recently, I think, yes, I remember what happened. So my wife is a psychotherapist, and she maintains a lot of confidentiality. I have no idea who her clients are. I don't know anybody's names. I don't know genders. I don't know anything. She's really, really immaculate, really clean about maintaining the confidentiality, even in the confidence with me as her husband. But sometimes she will just tell me about something that came up with someone as a way of just sharing. This is this person who was dealing, again, I have no idea who it is, even their gender, I don't know where they live, anything. But it will just be a person that she's working with whom she said was dealing with some difficult childhood issues. Actually, didn't give me all the details, but had a lot of hurt from certain things, legitimate, and had a lot of anger and really rage that had been built up inside, but didn't feel like it was okay to feel your feelings, something like that. Again, she didn't give me all the details. And then she was feeling, one of the things that was not helping the client was a very, very well-known Buddhist Dharma teacher. I won't name the name, but if I did, it would be someone that you all know, who I actually respect a lot. I won't say the gender of the person either, but this particular teacher was giving teachings that you shouldn't be feeling, if you have anger, resentment, you should let go and forgive. So it was the essence of this. At least that's how my wife's client, so, this is coming, I don't know what the teacher really said, but that's the way it was landed and was received by the client, as conveyed to my wife, as conveyed to me, now conveyed to you. So I don't want to be too hard on that Dharma teacher. Now, but let's just say that that's an accurate representation. I really was reflecting on that. And the reason I thought I wanted to bring it here is that I myself, I think in this group actually several weeks ago, gave a talk, and I was really talking about for those of us who are committed to, say, living in love, for example, that when difficulties come and when we have the presence to be with it, I myself was saying, what I find for myself is when I know what's happening in the moment, and if my heart's closed off, my task is to drop it and open to love, right? And I was speaking like this. So kind of like that unnamed Dharma teacher was teaching. I do think that's an important piece that we need to have in our, I like to think of having tools in our toolkit. We need to know when it's time to drop our attitude and to just open in love and let it go. I would even go so far as to recommend that that's always the right approach if you can do it. That's the key, right? But it's never always the right answer, and because sometimes what's needed in order to get to a place of letting go, if you're ever going to have any chances, you need to have your anger. And it's not indulging, it's part of the healing process to get in touch with the wound, perhaps experience the anger, perhaps express the anger, to be authentic, if that's what's really the truth of what's really in there. That's the point. What's real and true. And so we can try to bypass around these things. We talk about bypass, psychological bypass, spiritual bypass. Maybe, I don't know anyone who claims it works, but maybe you can. But generally, if there are things in there sometimes things heal and let go on their own. You don't have to yell and scream and hit the pillow. And I'm not saying that by any means you need to do that, but maybe. And my point here is, and this is really the main point I wanted to make. I feel that for any aspect in life, I don't care what it is. Here again, we're more in the Dharma world, the meditation world, but I don't care what it is in any aspect. I don't care if it's your golf game. There's never one right answer. That's a one-size-fits-all for anyone. As a matter of fact, speaking of golf, I don't follow golf much, but I just happened to see a news article. I didn't read the whole thing. I just kind of saw the headline, and I've read the first paragraph. There's some golfer in the professional golfer. If you're any of your golfers, you'll know, as I describe this person who has a highly unusual, unorthodox swing. So much so that, there's some standard ways you swing, right? You hold the club and whatever. And if you don't do it, you're going to be hitting the ball off at crazy angles and everything. And this guy's just completely off from any of that. And I looked at his swing, and it does, I guess, look different. But people who know golf said, well, this guy, it's like a joke or something. But he's just consistently, over a period of some years, one of the top among the best golfers. He's up in that league, the top 10, consistently in the PGA Tour. Well, and he was talking about it, and when I read a little bit, and it was kind of getting to the same thing. How his body works. Maybe it's the way his joints are aligned, or how tight or loose his ligaments are, or what the way is just somatically, neurologically, how he's wired up. He better be hitting it that strange, goofy way, because if he tries to hit it like whomever, Tiger Woods, it's not going to work for him. It's not. And I thought that was just a great example and really exemplar for, I think, anything really in life. And so, for example, if any of you who meditate with me, maybe some of you have sat at retreats with me, I'm a little different than a lot of teachers because I'll go and teach at some of the major, I don't teach around all that much anymore, but I was just last year, I taught a month long at Spirit Rock, and I know all those teachers, known them for years, and we're more or less in the same, I want to cooperate and not go off too crazy. But, and so they have a system that's just been teaching for years. It's a great system. I have a lot of respect for it. I practice in that system myself, but I don't practice or teach in that system anymore. And it's not better or worse, they're offering their system. And I was getting, not into trouble, but we had some interesting discussions because I'm of the school that I don't think there's any form or any way on the retreat that it should or shouldn't look. Let me take that back. You shouldn't be disturbing other people. Whatever you do should be invisible to others, but within yourself and what you're doing. So one example is when you go on retreats, those of you who've done it, you know that in our tradition, that there's many different ways people do retreats, but in sort of the insight meditation tradition here in the West, places like Spirit Rock, IMS, typically you'll come and there's a pretty standard form, which has to do with silence and slowing down, and you sit and you walk and you kind of bring your energy in. And that's the way I tend to naturally work myself. And for many people, that is supportive. And certainly on the outside, you don't want to go out of that because it can disturb other people's space and for them. But away from the visibility of others, I have learned that it doesn't matter what we say. It doesn't matter. It will be a great fit for some people, and it's going to be a bad match for others because we're all different. You have to, this is going back to learning to listen to your own inner truth. But a lot of people need a lot of permission for someone in a teacher role, for example. So I've had people on retreat, and I've said, I remember one person in particular, and I just said, I don't think you should be showing up at all the sits. And don't do slow walking. And my recommendation, and I just said, go try it. They say, just because I say it, they still have to go try it themselves, see the result for themselves. But my recommendation was to spend a lot of times out in nature, running up that mountain. If you've got a bicycle, ride your bike up there, running, hiking hard. And what they found is, because of the way just energetically in their body, that really supported them for when they could come back. They did less of the sits, but the ones they did were very settled, very deep, and they actually were able to have powerful meditations. But it was obvious that what was going on in their mind and their bodies, they needed energetically to be moving a lot. But that was the opposite of what probably most people were doing. But it's a perfect example of what is very much the right thing to do for one person is actually the worst thing to do for someone else. There is no one size fits all. I mean, for a few things, like don't go harm people. That's a one size fits all. Things like that. When it comes to what we call morality and precepts of causing harm around our actions, our speech, our sexuality, not stealing, not killing, not harming, okay. Yeah, there's probably, someone could come up with some example, I guess, to break the mold, but pretty much I think that's a place to use the word should, and probably is a one size fits all. But I'm talking about sort of our Dharma practice, the right response in any situation. And the big important thing is it goes back to knowing ourselves and being willing to trust. So like in meditation, for example, I've been meditating a lot of years, this year, 50 years, and put a lot into it. I still meditate a lot every day, and I have all this time. And I've gotten lots and lots of teachings from different teachers, which have been tremendously helpful, and people have been fabulous Dharma teachers for me. But it just happened in my particular case. I think I was fortunate. It's another example. Teachers would say, do this, do that. And I would try it on, but it was so obvious. I'm not saying it's true for everyone, but like for me, mindfulness of breathing was just my practice, one simple thing. But all these practices opened everything else. And I was able to trust and follow. And that was an example that it's not an arrogance. I still haven't reached the end of the path, and I still have, by definition, places of greed, hatred, and delusion in my own mind, as we all do. By definition, it's not doing anything wrong. It's in our tradition, until you're a Buddha yourself, that's just what it means to not be a Buddha. But I learned to trust that inner way it was unfolding. It became so obvious, and over time, you can trust more and more. And so I hope as we, either in your meditation practice, your Dharma practice, or really in any making a wise response in life, if we stay in touch with our intentions, which I know for all of us, which is to cause less and less harm, and for all of us to cause more and more well-being for the greater good, and that includes for ourselves and, of course, for others. If we keep that in alignment with it, that's really our refuge and our guide, is our sincere intention. Everything can be tested against that. And then we really have to learn to live with that inner teacher. It's not one way. You may need to let go of your anger and just drop it. Let, let go of your attitude and just turn to love. Or you may need to hang out in your anger. And maybe for you, speaking about forgiveness is the exact wrong thing to be doing, because you really got to tend to what happened in the wound and get in there, maybe do some therapy and hang out for a while and see how that unfolds as the healing process. You know, the healing process will reveal itself. I think I'll stop there.